Hello and welcome to another econolastic video. This video will be on the business cycle. So the aim of this video is for you to understand the different stages of the business cycle and the characteristics of an economy in these phases. So it is well documented that economies experience cycles, which we have covered in our intro to macro video. A cycle is where a period of growth alternates with periods of recession. A period can vary from a few months to several years. This general pattern is referred to the business cycle, which describes a cycle of fluctuations in GDP, gross domestic product, around its long-term natural growth rate.
So you should now see the business cycle graph on your screen, and you'll notice that the straight line in red, that represents the potential sustainable output, and it is upward sloping again, you will notice, and we'll come to that later in the video. And then the curved blue line, this represents GDP, which has been inflation adjusted. And each one of those stages we're going to go into now. So stage one is the expansion stage. This is usually identified by factors such as increased employment, higher incomes and wages, increasing output, so increasing GDP, and increasing profits. So these are what we're going to refer to throughout the rest of the video as economic indicators.
Yeah, so the second stage is known as the peak stage, also can be known as the saturation point. All resources are being fully utilised, so there's no room for growth in the economy. So the indicators mentioned in stage one have reached their peak. So basically, the only way from this point is down. And this can be linked back to scarcity. So, going back to
that we always try and do, isn't it, on this channel, is we try and link a lot of economic problems. Sometimes these teachings can get a bit lost as to how they all link together. And what we're trying to emphasize is everything really links back to the problem of scarcity. So I'll let you continue.
Yeah. So, like Andrew said, so scarcity, because it's supply side at this point, i.e., labour, natural resources, and capital, there is only so much. Therefore, this is the peak stage. There's only so much labour we can use. There's only so much natural resources we can use. So at this point, we are fully utilising all these scarce resources. So the only place we can go now is down.
Yeah. So where we would go down to is known as a recession. So we have defined a recession in a previous video, but just again as a recap, it's defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. So the economy is shrinking. Yeah. In this recession phase, you will find that the demand for goods and services start to decline. And after the peak phase, firms have, during that phase, that peak phase in stage 2, they've started to invest in more labour, they've invested in more capital, etc. Anything that's going to improve their production process to keep up with demand in that peak phase. They utilise these resources by producing the maximum amount they can, again, in that peak phase. However, in the recession phase, the demand started to fall. So there is a bit of a lag before firms notice this fall in demand. And this lag causes an excess of supply from the firm into the market. So if you think about that logically, this would lead to falling prices. There's excess supply, there's falling demand. So along with, prices will fall along with the other economic indicators that we mentioned in stage 1.
So stage 4 is depression. Now, stage 4 actually can be optional. So in the 1930s,
in a sense, anyway.
In a sense. So in the 1930s, it experienced a depression, and there's no real one definition of a depression. It's generally considered a prolonged, a persistent recession.
And you'll know one if you're in one. That's the
Yeah.
best way to know if it's a depression.
Yeah, exactly. And it's optional just because it doesn't have to happen. It
Yeah.
can
So what we mean by optional is that in a business cycle, you won't necessarily go stage 3 recession and stage 4 depression. Only the very worst recessions will make it to a depression. So you would most of the time will go from stage 3 recession to stage 5, which Joe's going to cover now in the trough.
Yeah, so the trough. So this is the lowest point in the cycle, sometimes known as the lowest saturation point for an economy. So demand and supply are at the lowest. However, there is a basic minimum level of consumption that people tend to maintain, well, need to maintain on an essential goods and services. So an example of goods is obviously food, basic food and clothes. However, I would argue over generations, these basic necessities have probably increased.
Definitely shifted, haven't they?
Yeah.
A basic necessity in the Great Depression was literally a roof over your head,
Yeah.
somewhere to, well, some food to go in your belly, somewhere to keep you warm.
Yeah.
Whereas now, a basic necessity for a lot of people is a mobile phone, it's a TV, it's a comfy bed. The lowest level of consumption, as Joe says, on essential goods is a lot higher than what it was generations ago.
Yeah, 100%. And I think probably one of the most sort of basic necessities I'd say would be, Wi-Fi, internet access would be, is a massive thing now as a basic necessity.
So what we're saying in this point is that people, no matter how bad things get, people tend to maintain this lowest level of consumption that, like we've explained, in today's age is usually on Wi-Fi, some basic technology, and obviously goods and such as food and clothes still as well.
Yeah. So at this stage, firms still invest on a basic level. They would have to replace broken equipment or invest in the newest equipment to keep them competitive. However, so there's a flaw to the investment as well in consumption. So they obviously still have to maintain the business, but they wouldn't be, looking to expand, massively. So
just as there's a flaw to consumption, there's a
Yeah.
lowest level of consumption. There's also a lowest level of investment. If your machine breaks and you can't produce what you make money from, you're going to have to replace the machine. If there's a new technology out there that's going to put your competitors way and above what you can do, you're going to have to invest in the new machinery. There's still a flaw to investment, just as there is a flaw to consumption.
And because of this, the economy really at this point can only go one way, and that's up. So it can only really improve at this point.
So, as Joe says, if we're going up, if we're improving from this point, we'll get to the last stage of the business cycle, which is the recovery phase. So the economy now begins to recover from that negative growth rate experienced during the recession or possibly depression. Demand increases off the back of reduced prices. So we know, again, in the recession phase, there was an excess of supply over demand. But now demand increases because the prices have adjusted and come down. Demand now increases off the back of this. Therefore, supply then reacts by increasing production because demand has increased. This all comes along with increasing expectations. They improve. Investment also increases. Employment will increase. And also something to note is that during a recession, banks tend not to lend. They often build up large cash reserves. So when demand starts increasing, businesses start investing more, banks will start lending those large cash reserves they built up during the recession that will help shift the economy into that recovery phase. So they'll lend this for companies that want to replace old capital or machinery and invest in their production process.
So the economy has now run full cycle. So the whole period above the straight line is a boom and is above sustainable levels. So therefore, it's only short term. So the whole period below the straight line is a bust. And finally, we just want to touch on why the red line slopes upwards.
Which we mentioned at the start of the video, didn't we? Joe's just going to cover some of the reasons as to why the sustainable level of output does increase over time. And we have experienced this. There's data to back this up.
So firstly, there's technology. So this includes, better capital, better machinery in factories, so production can increase. Secondly, there's education. So a more skilled workforce is able to produce more over time, and the health and population levels as well. So people who live longer can contribute to society for longer. Higher populations, obviously, you can produce more. So again,
and that's often to increased and better healthcare, isn't it? The people are tending to live longer and can therefore stay in the workforce longer.
Yeah.
And tying that all in actually is then increasing population. So an increase in population, you're likely to get more people, more innovative thinkers that contribute to new technology, which drives that avenue again. You're going to likely have more educated people, so then more productive workforce. And again, a bit links into innovation. There's more people, there's more likely to be innovative healthcare, improved healthcare, and again, that will lead to people leading longer, healthier lives, and therefore contributing to the workforce for longer. So the population increase kind of ties all of those points in.
And it's an interesting point, actually. I can't remember which economist, but they sort of predicted that because of population growth, we would have massive food shortages by now.
Yeah.
But one of the things that wasn't accounted for in that scenario, and again, this shows on the graph going from the bottom to the top, is technology and human innovation. So because there is more population, like Andrew says, there's more innovators. So people, better equipment, making equipment and better methods of farming to produce more food for that more higher population. So that's quite an interesting point.
We'll find a link to that article actually and leave it in just below the video. And we hope you have enjoyed this video. As always, if you have any questions on this, please leave them in the comments section. We'll get around to answering all your questions, and we hope to see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.